Elara Voss stood before the towering tribunal of Zerth Academy, her fists clenched so tightly that her nails dug into her palms. A panel of alien scholars, their iridescent robes shimmering under the dim glow of the high chamber's bioluminescent ceiling, regarded her with the same cold detachment one might afford a failed experiment. At the center of the tribunal sat Chancellor Veilkar, his elongated features twisted in something that might have been amusement or disdain. His triple-pupilled eyes flickered in predatory satisfaction as he finally spoke. Elara Voss of Sol 3, he announced, his voice reverberating through the chamber, by unanimous decision of the High Council, your enrollment at Zerth Academy is hereby revoked. Effective immediately. A stunned silence gripped the hall. Then, murmurs, some in disbelief, others in quiet satisfaction, rippled through the assembled students and faculty. Elara's heart pounded. She knew this was coming, but hearing it aloud made her stomach churn. On what grounds? She asked, forcing her voice to remain steady. Chancellor Veilkar tilted his head, feigning patience. Zerth Academy prides itself on cultivating the brightest minds of the galaxy, those species who have proven their intellectual superiority over millennia. Humanity. He let the word hang in the air like an insult, remains an undeveloped species. You lack the genetic refinement, the evolutionary advancements, the fundamental intellectual depth to grasp the higher sciences. Elara's fingers twitched. Genetic refinement? Was that what they were calling their discrimination now? Before she could reply, Professor V.A. Kor, one of Zertha's most decorated scientists, leaned forward. The Zelvian's silver-blue skin rippled in irritation as he addressed her. Consider this an act of mercy, child. You may return to your kind and pursue simpler disciplines. Laughter echoed across the hall. A rush of heat burned through Elara's veins, but she refused to let them see her anger. Instead, she straightened her posture. I scored higher than every student in the last theoretical physics symposium, she said, her voice calm but edged with steel. I solved your so-called unsolvable dark matter equation in under an hour. But because I have the wrong biology, I'm not evolved enough to be here. The Chancellor's expression darkened. You presume to challenge the Council's wisdom? I presume to challenge your arrogance, Elara shot back. The silence that followed was deafening. Veilkar exhaled slowly, as if bored. Then, with a flick of his wrist, he motioned to the waiting guards. Escort her off the premises. Two towering reptilian Draxer sentries stepped forward, their scaled hands reaching for her. Elara stiffened but didn't resist. There was no point. Not here. Not yet. As they led her past the crowd of students, many of whom refused to meet her gaze, she caught sight of Thrix, her only true friend at Zerth Academy. The Vishari's black-furred face was tense, his deep violet eyes flicking between her and the tribunal. This is wrong, he whispered as she passed. She managed a bitter smile. Tell me something I don't know. The Academy's towering gates loomed ahead. Once she stepped past them, Zerth Academy, its knowledge, its resources, and its future, would be lost to her forever. As the sentries shoved her forward, her wrist communicator pinged. A single message. We need to talk. Immediately. Dad. Elara glanced up at the Academy's grand spires one last time, her chest tightening. They thought they had humiliated her. That they had broken her. They had no idea what they had just unleashed. Jonathan Voss stood at the edge of his private skydeck, hands clasped behind his back, eyes fixed on the shimmering cityscape of Titan's capital below. The neon skyline reflected off the glass-like surface of Saturn's largest moon, a sprawling testament to human ambition and ingenuity. He had built empires, forged industries, turned Sol into an economic powerhouse that even the most reluctant alien civilizations depended on. And yet, at this moment, none of that mattered. His daughter had just been expelled. Not because she had failed. Not because she had broken any rules. Because she was human. The message from Elara still flickered on the hollow display in front of him. The video footage of her expulsion played on a loop, showing Chancellor Veilkar's smug expression as he dismissed her like a disobedient child. Jonathan's jaw tightened. The Zerth fools thought they were untouchable, that their academic empire was beyond consequence. They were about to learn otherwise. A soft chime interrupted his thoughts. Sir, his AI assistant, LYNX, chimed in. The Zerth Academy Board is requesting an emergency meeting. Priority 1. Jonathan exhaled slowly. He had expected this. The moment he shut off their funding, the bureaucrats would come scrambling like starved rats. Patch them through. The holodisplay expanded, revealing a council of frantic alien faces, Zerth's administrative board. Their usual air of superiority had been replaced with thinly veiled desperation. Mr. Voss, Chancellor Velkar began, his triple pupils narrowing. There appears to be a misunderstanding. Jonathan allowed the silence to stretch just long enough for discomfort to settle in. Then, his voice came out calm. Controlled. Lethal. No, Chancellor. I understand perfectly. A visible ripple of unease passed through the council. Zerth Academy is an independent institution, Velkar continued, choosing his words carefully. We reserve the right to determine our admissions policy. This decision was purely academic, not personal. Jonathan almost laughed. Academic? You expelled the highest performing student in your institution's history, he said flatly. For no other reason than her species. The Chancellor's expression didn't waver. Humanity's contributions to interstellar academia are modest at best. Surely, you see why we must maintain our standards. Jonathan smiled, but it never reached his eyes. Standards, he repeated. Let's talk about those. He turned to LYNX. Initiate Protocol Helios. The AI complied instantly. Across the galaxy, every single research grant, infrastructure project, and trade deal associated with Zerth Academy was terminated in real time. The effects were immediate. Alarmed beeping erupted from the council's side of the call as their data streams updated. Their faces shifted from mild discomfort to outright panic. Wait, one of the alien administrators sputtered. This must be an error. Jonathan leaned forward, his voice dropping to a razor-sharp whisper. No error. The truth crashed over them like a tidal wave. Zerth Academy wasn't just losing some funding. They were losing everything. You seem to have forgotten, Jonathan continued, who built your research centers. Who funds your off-world campuses? Who bankrolls 70% of your cutting-edge projects? Velkar's comm mask finally cracked. Mr. Voss, please. Be reasonable. Surely, we can discuss. Jonathan cut him off. Discussion ended the moment you humiliated my daughter. More beeping. More panicked voices. The full scope of their mistake was dawning on them, but it was already too late. Sir, LYNX interrupted. Incoming message from Alara. Jonathan's gaze flicked to the alert. Put her through. The display shifted, revealing Alara, standing outside the gates of Zerth Academy, the alien architecture looming behind her. Despite the humiliation she had endured, her expression wasn't one of defeat. It was determination. Dad, she said, eyes burning with resolve. I want to fight back. Jonathan smiled. Good, he said. Because we're about to burn them to the ground. This content may violate our usage policies. Did we get it wrong? Please tell us by giving this response a thumbs down. The rejection should have broken her. It should have sent her spiraling into despair, forced her to accept humanity's place as a second-rate species in the galactic academic hierarchy. But instead, Alara Voss stood in her father's private orbital station, staring at the holographic projections of Zerth Academy's most classified research initiatives, and smirking. They had expelled her, believing they were casting her into irrelevance. They had no idea what she was about to do. You have their full research database? Alara asked, raising an eyebrow as her father leaned back in his chair. Jonathan Voss took a sip of his scotch, unfazed. Not all of it. Just the good parts. Around them, a hand-picked team of human and alien scientists pored over the data, already seeing what Alara saw: opportunity. Zerth Academy had never been the sole authority on knowledge. They had simply controlled access to it. Now, that monopoly was gone. Alara's fingers danced over the hollow interface, scrolling through fields of research Zerth's scholars had hoarded for centuries. Theories they had dismissed as beyond humanity's comprehension now lay exposed before her, waiting to be torn apart, refined, and surpassed. She turned to the assembled researchers, some of humanity's brightest, others ambitious alien defectors tired of Zerth's archaic elitism. "We're not just taking them down," she said, her voice cool but resolute. "We're replacing them." Within days, the news swept through the galaxy like wildfire. Alara Voss, the expelled human prodigy, establishes rival institution, the Voss Institute of Interstellar Advancement. Galactic media erupted. Zerth Academy's name was everywhere, not as the pinnacle of academia, but as a symbol of discrimination and stagnation. And worse, the first public challenge was issued. "I invite Zerth Academy's best and brightest to an academic duel," Alara announced in a broadcast transmitted across all major interstellar networks. "Let's see whose knowledge truly leads the future." The challenge was bold, public, unavoidable. The academic duel was a sacred tradition, dating back millennia among the galaxy's greatest civilizations. It was a contest of minds, not weapons. A structured battle where scholars competed in real-time problem-solving, scientific demonstrations, and technological breakthroughs. And Zerth? They couldn't refuse. Not without admitting they feared a mere human. The moment the challenge was issued, the galaxy erupted with speculation. Would Zerth accept? Would they crush this upstart human in a display of dominance? Or, unthinkable as it was, could they actually lose? From the Zelvian dynasties to the Draxer warlords, civilizations tuned in to watch. The debate raged across networks, news panels, and even political councils. For the first time in history, humanity wasn't just a footnote in the galactic academic sphere. They were the center of it. Inside the High Council chamber of Zerth Academy, Chancellor Velkar's composure cracked. He had expected backlash. He had expected Voss to throw his wealth around, to disrupt funding. But this was a direct challenge to Zerth's authority. And it was working. The Academy's faculty, normally untouchable in their ivory towers, were nervous. Students whispered of defection. Sponsors began withdrawing, unwilling to associate with an institution losing its grip. Something had to be done. Velkar turned to Professor V.A. Kaur, whose silver-blue skin shimmered under the council chamber's dim light. "We accept," the professor said grimly. "And we will destroy her." Back in the Voss orbital station, Alara studied the profiles of her upcoming opponents. Her heart pounded, not with fear, but with exhilaration. The greatest minds in Zerth's history were coming for her. Good. She was ready. The Grand Academic Coliseum was packed beyond capacity. Hovering observation drones zipped through the air, broadcasting live feeds to billions across the galaxy. The arena, an enormous domed structure crafted from crystallized obsidian, had once been the stage for some of the most legendary intellectual battles in galactic history. And now, a single human stood at its center. Alara Voss adjusted the collar of her sleek exo-weave jacket, her expression unreadable as the Zerth tribunal made their grand entrance. The assembled council of alien scholars took their places on an elevated dais, their elaborate robes shimmering under the ethereal glow of the floating projection displays. At the opposite end of the arena, Zerth's champions stood waiting. Among them was Professor V.A. Kaur, the Zelvian who had personally lobbied for her expulsion. His silver-blue skin rippled in anticipation, his gaze sharp and predatory. Beside him, 3 of Zerth Academy's most decorated students, geniuses in their own right, prepared for what they believed would be a public execution of Alara's credibility. They were in for a surprise. The rules of the academic duel appeared in midair, projected in multiple languages. 5 challenges. 5 fields of science. No outside assistance. All solutions must be demonstrated in real time. First to win 3 challenges claims victory. The tribunal's lead adjudicator raised a clawed hand, signaling the start. Round 1, Theoretical Astrophysics. The battle begins. The first challenge materialized on the arena's central holodisplay, a gravitational instability problem involving binary pulsars orbiting a singularity. A problem so complex that only 2 known scholars in the galaxy had ever solved it. The countdown began. Elara's hands flew across her workstation, calculations firing in her mind at speeds that would have left her Zerth professors stunned. Equations flowed across her screen as she constructed a dynamic predictive model, bypassing the traditional multi-step approach her opponents were taking. Professor Voss smirked, speaking into his microphone. A fascinating attempt, but humans always make the mistake of oversimplifying. That's why you will fail. Elara didn't even look up. Instead, she executed her final equation, and the system simulation stabilized perfectly. The holodisplay blinked. Winner of Round 1, Elara Voss. Gasps echoed through the Colosseum. The tribunal exchanged uneasy glances. Elara permitted herself a small smile. 1 down. Round 2, Biomechanical Engineering. The second challenge was even harder. Construct a functioning neural interface capable of synchronizing with a non-carbon-based nervous system. Voss and his students went to work, assembling standard Zerth neural link prototypes. Elara? She did something different. She pulled out a human-designed quantum bioadaptive interface, a technology Zerth had dismissed as theoretical nonsense. And she made it work in minutes. The moment her test subject, an alien species Zerth had never been able to link neurally, successfully transmitted data across the interface, the results were undeniable. Winner of Round 2, Elara Voss. The audience erupted. Round 3, Quantum Computation. The third challenge was brutal. The kind of impossible task Zerth thrived on, solve a collapsing probability wave in under 5 minutes. Voss, now visibly furious, pulled out Zerth's most advanced predictive algorithms. Elara? She wrote her own. The timer hit 0. The scores lit up. Winner, Zerth Academy. Elara exhaled slowly, shaking her head. She had been close, but close wasn't good enough. 2-1. Round 4, Exotic Energy Manipulation. This was Voss's specialty. A test of zero-point energy stabilization, requiring participants to construct an energy field capable of sustained balance. As expected, the Zerth team executed flawlessly. Elara, however, hit a snag. She had designed a method based on human experimental energy field manipulation, but the materials given didn't react the same way. Time ran out. Winner, Zerth Academy. The scoreboard now read 2-2. One final challenge would decide everything. The final challenge, the impossible invention. The tribunal's lead adjudicator stepped forward. The final test will be the creation of a functioning quantum gravity disruptor. A hushed murmur swept through the Colosseum. This was not a standard challenge. This was a trap. Quantum gravity manipulation was an unsolved field, even among Zerth's elite. No one, not even the most advanced civilizations, had ever successfully created a functioning disruptor. Voss smirked. Let's see if humanity's arrogance extends to engineering impossibilities. Elara's mind raced. She had theory, but never had the resources to test it. Now, she had minutes to make it work. She inhaled, steadied her hands, and got to work. As the final seconds ticked down, Elara's screen flashed green. Her prototype was built. She reached for the activation control. Voss's team was seconds behind. The entire galaxy held its breath. And then, she pressed the button. For a fraction of a second, nothing happened. Then the air in the Grand Academic Coliseum warped. A low hum vibrated through the arena as space itself began to bend around Elara's prototype. The stabilizing field she had designed shimmered, forming an iridescent sphere that pulsed with gravitational distortions. Gasps rippled through the audience. Some leaned forward in disbelief. Others instinctively recoiled, their instincts warning them that what they were witnessing should not be possible. A functioning quantum gravity disruptor, a theoretical impossibility. And a human had just built it. Professor Vaucor's expression remained frozen, his fingers hovering over his own interface. He had been seconds away from completing his team's design, an outdated, inefficient attempt that, even if activated first, would have collapsed under its own instability. But now, his team had lost. The tribunal's lead adjudicator stepped forward, her reptilian gaze flicking between the Zerth team's incomplete device and the stable gravitational distortions rippling around Alara's invention. She raised a clawed hand. Winner of the final challenge, Alara Voss. Silence. Then, the Colosseum erupted. The broadcast feed of the academic duel spread across the interstellar networks like a wildfire. A human, a species considered primitive just weeks ago, had just publicly defeated Zerth Academy's best scholars in their own domain. The implications were monumental. Within hours, Alara Voss's name was everywhere. Galactic think tanks scrambled to revise their stance on human intellect. Scientific institutions debated the legitimacy of Zerth Academy's superiority. Political factions reconsidered their alliances with Earth. And in the heart of the Voss orbital station, Jonathan Voss watched the chaos unfold with a knowing smile. "You did it," he murmured, watching his daughter's face on the holographic broadcasts. "You didn't just prove them wrong. You changed everything." Within Zerth Academy's council chambers, Chancellor Vaucor stood rigid as reports flooded in. Dozens of their sponsors were pulling out. High-ranking students were leaving. Entire research divisions were demanding resignations. The Academy's monopoly on academic prestige had been shattered. And it had happened in a single night. Vaucor clenched his jaw, his mind racing for solutions. Damage control. Rebuilding. Retaliation. But even he knew the truth. Zerth Academy would never be the same again. As the victory celebrations erupted across human colonies and beyond, Alara found herself staring at the stars through the massive observation windows of her father's station. The weight of what she had done settled on her shoulders. This wasn't just about an expulsion anymore. This was about what came next. A soft chime interrupted her thoughts. Incoming transmission from the Zelvian Science Directorate, LYNX reported. "They're requesting a collaboration on your quantum gravity research." Alara exhaled slowly. The same species that had mocked humanity's intelligence just days ago now wanted to work with her. She tapped the console. "Put them through." As the transmission connected, Alara knew one thing for certain. This was just the beginning. Alara Voss stood before a sea of holographic cameras, her image broadcasted across hundreds of worlds. Billions were watching. Some in admiration. Others in stunned silence. And a select few in fear. She had defied Zerth Academy. She had beaten them. And now, the entire galactic academic order was scrambling to catch up. Behind her, the newly established Voss Institute of Interstellar Advancement loomed, a gleaming testament to everything the old institutions had refused to acknowledge. Humanity was not inferior. Humanity was not unworthy. Humanity was the future. Alara exhaled, steadied her hands, and spoke. "To the scholars who stand for truth, join us. To the civilizations that seek progress, collaborate with us. And to those who once dismissed us, keep watching." She let the words settle. The message was clear. Humanity had arrived. Far across the stars, within Zerth Academy's once revered halls, Chancellor Vaucor watched in silence. The institution he had spent his life defending was crumbling. Their sponsors had fled. Their best scholars had defected. Their research projects, once unrivaled, were now obsolete. And all because of a single human girl. Vaucor's claws dug into the armrest of his chair. The shame was unbearable. "We must retaliate," Professor Vaucor hissed beside him. "We cannot let them rewrite history." But Vaucor knew. It was already rewritten. In the days that followed Alara's victory, the ripple effect spread through the stars. The Zelvian Science Directorate, once dismissive of humanity, announced a joint research initiative with the Voss Institute. The Draxer warlords, once viewing humans as insignificant, formally invited Alara to consult on military engineering advancements. Independent researchers, engineers, and scholars abandoned their old institutions to seek work with humanity's rising scientific powerhouse. For the first time in history, Zerth Academy was no longer the peak of knowledge. And for the first time in history, humanity led the charge into the unknown. Alara's final decision. Back in her father's orbital station, Alara stood in the research bay, gazing at the prototype that had changed everything, her quantum gravity disruptor. A device that shouldn't have been possible. A device that proved human ingenuity was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Jonathan Voss stepped beside her, arms crossed. "You've done more than anyone could have imagined." Alara nodded but didn't take her eyes off the device. "It's not enough." Jonathan raised an eyebrow. "Oh?" Alara turned to him, determination burning in her gaze. "We spent so long proving that we belong," she said. "Now it's time to show them we're meant to lead." She tapped the console. The blueprints for the disruptor expanded into the air, then transformed into something new. Bigger. Bolder. A design that would push the boundaries of interstellar travel, energy manipulation, and warfare. Jonathan steadied it, then let out a low chuckle. "You really don't know when to stop, do you?" Alara grinned. "Nope." As the stars stretched before her, Alara knew one thing for certain. Zerth Academy had tried to erase her. Instead, they had created their own downfall. And now? She was going to change the galaxy forever.